Hi, everyone. It's Kyle Alexander Morgan, host of the Original Sin podcast. We are brought to you today by True Crime Story 911. Today, we're speaking to David Robinson II, father of Daniel Robinson. In June 2021, Daniel Robinson went missing in the Arizona desert and hasn't been seen since. Hello, Mr. David Robinson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
No problem. I wanted to talk to you about your son, about when he was last seen and circumstances of his disappearance. So I understand that he went missing on the 23rd of June, 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and he was last seen leaving his work in Buckeye, Arizona with Matrix New World?
That's right. It's an engineering company.
Okay, he was a geologist.
That's right. Hydrogeologist, also called a field geologist.
Okay, great. All right. From what I understand is that he was last seen around 9:15. He was driving a bluish gray 2017 Jeep, and it was going west towards the desert, according to a coworker. Now, it says that he was reported missing the next day. Did you report him missing, or how did that occur?
Well, actually, on June the 23rd, 2021, it was the same as that day. I reported my son missing. Okay. I was in South Carolina, so it's 3-hour difference this time of the year.
Right.
I did report him missing after I realized Daniel was missing for over 6 hours.
Right. Okay. And what happened later on that day? Can you tell us? You had a lapse of communication with him, and was that unusual for him? Did he, constantly keep in contact with you, or throughout the day, or made you file a missing persons report, or was it his coworkers? I'm just wondering.
Well, to back it up a little bit, that morning, from what I understand, Daniel had two well sites to go to. One early part of that morning, the second to meet a person off of Sun Valley Parkway, that's in Buckeye, Arizona. I meet a person that works for a different company called Weber Waterworks. Of course, that worker reported that Daniel to his job, that Daniel drove away from the work site, is what I was told. What brought me into the conversation of that is when one of Daniel's coworkers, a friend of his, an off-the-job friend of his, came to my daughter's apartment. She was living in Phoenix, Arizona at the time, and inquired if Daniel was there. She was really puzzled about it, wondering how this guy knew where she lived, first of all. Second part is why he's asking for Daniel. And so, of course, my daughter's going to call me to let me know what's going on in Arizona.
Right.
I'm in Columbia, South Carolina at the time. But like I said, just the fact that once we realized something was going horribly wrong, and the way we found that out is I sent my daughter to his apartment to see if he was there. In the meantime, I was called his mother and some other family members and friends, see if they even heard from Daniel that day. Nobody have. I looked at the time difference. Like I said, it's a 3-hour difference from South Carolina to Arizona. So I look at the time difference from the time they said, the workers at the job said, they last heard from him was in that morning hours, and it was over 6 hours. So that's when I decided to have a welfare check first done, and then after that, report him missing. Okay,
so they did go to his apartment and they didn't find anything?
They didn't directly go to his apartment. Daniel lived in Tempe, Arizona at the time. This is like a city outside of Phoenix. I did reach out to law enforcement of Tempe. They did not want to go do a welfare check. I had to later was pushed over to the Buckeye Police Department because that was the last place he was seen. And convinced them to have Tempe to go out and do a welfare check, which they only drove by his apartment through his patio window, and that was the extent of that welfare check.
Okay, and tell me what happened next after you reported him missing. Did the police immediately start searching for him, or what happened there?
No, we couldn't get any search done. Once I gathered more information, I was talking to an officer, I think his name was Officer Cruz at the time. The only thing they was doing at the time in terms of searching is to ride up and down Sun Valley Parkway in the area where Daniel was missing, outside of the Sonoran Desert, but out in that area. They roll up and down that road. It's a very long road. I say that road pretty much is a good 50 miles long, but they wanted to make sure he wasn't stuck on the side of the road. So, of course, once I found out that Daniel actually went missing in the desert, I requested them to send a helicopter out to search for him. That was turned down, denied. A day later, they said they was going to do it the next day. That was denied as well. So that was prompting me to leave my home in South Carolina to drive up to Arizona to look for Daniel myself.
So did you organize a search party, or what happened? You went there by yourself looking for Daniel?
Yes, I did. I had my daughter in Phoenix. So once I got to Arizona and Phoenix, my daughter and I did our due diligence. We searched the airports and just to make sure. We know Daniel wouldn't do it, but just in case something that we just didn't know, we searched literally every parking space in the airports, the private spots. Reached out to Red Cross, NAACP, and some other organizations for help. We also worked with law enforcement at the time, getting all the information that we can give them. But yes, I started my own search for Daniel when law enforcement would not, because I went out there every day on Sun Valley Parkway almost to, the only thing that would separate me from my son was the desert itself. I decided to organize a search, and I did that.
Okay. And unfortunately, you didn't find Daniel at that time.
No. After a total of 49 weeks, covered over 35,000 acres of land. We recover other human remains, bring clothes for other families, but no, I have not found my son.
So I have here that a rancher found Daniel's Jeep in a ravine with his airbags deployed on his property on July 23rd, which is roughly a month later. And that same rancher had been in the ravine on the 17th, and his car wasn't there, the 17th of July, and his car wasn't turned over in the ravine. Is that correct?
Well, on the 19th of July, when the rancher, yes, sir. The rancher found my son's vehicle, but yes, like you said, he testified for my investigator that he was there 2 days prior looking for his cattle that comes through that ravine to get to a corral. The vehicle wasn't there, but on the 19th it was.
Okay, so in the vehicle, they found Daniel's personal belongings. They found the clothes outside the vehicle, his keys, wallet, cell phone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so clothes that they found, I was kind of confused. The clothes were found outside of the car, right? Were those the clothes that he was wearing that day?
We didn't have nobody can verify that's what Daniel was wearing. To date, my daughter, who sees Daniel almost every day, don't recognize the clothing, but nevertheless, that's something that law enforcement telling us as family. The clothing was found 3 feet away from the vehicle in a pile, and they're saying it's Daniel's clothing, but we have no evidence of that.
Okay, and they never tested the clothing, anything, DNA?
No, they have not.
Are they still holding on to the clothing, or have they returned his belongings to you?
Well, I can tell you, once that vehicle showed up on July the 19th, on the 20th, the vehicle was turned over to me. And on the 23rd, everything from that scene, his clothing, everything was returned to me. All was for safekeeping, returned to me as safekeeping. There was no forensics done. On the 23rd, I requested law enforcement to do some type of forensic work, which they ended up doing, swabbing of the steering wheel, the shifter, and also the door panel. Of course, I'm currently trying to make sure they do all the forensic work because all the airbags deployed, suggesting someone else was in the vehicle. We need to verify that who those persons were inside the vehicle.
Okay. In September 2021, I have here that the Buckeye Police Department, they went out with helicopters, drones, cadaver dogs, and is that correct? I wanted to verify that with you.
Oh, that was a day out. That was on the 19th of July.
July. Okay.
Yeah, I know when the vehicle was found, I was told that they utilized cadaver dogs and search dogs, which they came up with nothing from that. But yes, that's what I was told.
Okay. And from there, where did you go? Is that when you hired the private investigator to look at the scene of the accident?
Yes, I did. And the reason why I hired a private investigator at the time, the assessment from law enforcement, what they saw at the scene, they didn't do any forensic work at the scene, but told me that the vehicle flipped and rolled and landed in a 20-foot ravine, lied on the side. They felt that Daniel did not sustain any injuries, but at the same time, because he had a seatbelt on, but at the same time, they said they believe he have a severe head injury, hit his way out of the sunroof. And because of that head injury, which they told me would cause a person to feel like they are hot, he shredded his clothes off. That's why the clothing was 3 feet away from the vehicle. He may have wandered off under a bush or something to cool off, and the wild animal got to him. Then they also told me later that maybe he just decided to get away from his family, join a monastery, become a monk. So those two sentiments from law enforcement made me want a second opinion. And so I hired my private investigator, who is also a accident reconstructionist, and he found a lot of the evidence and things that we know about that vehicle to this date.
Okay, and you're referring to the car ignition was switched on and off over 45 times?
Yes, my investigator found 11 additional miles on that vehicle after the initial crash. He believed that from the damage, the vehicle was staged there because there's no damage on the vehicle that matches the terrain. Found red transfer paint on the side of the vehicle. There's nothing red in the desert, so it had to come in contact with something. Also, there was 46 initial cycles after the first when the airbag deployed. the first crash. There's also the first accident happened around 1:00, close to 1:00 that day. So we have a lot of information that came from my private investigator he found, with the vehicle.
Okay. After that, was it after that happened that you discovered that someone had entered Daniel's apartment and had accessed his personal laptop and ransacked his home?
Well, early on, my private investigator came on board. We had law enforcement before my investigator came on. I had law enforcement to, we had agreement with the landlords to go into Danny's apartment to be able to take some pictures. They weren't able to touch anything, but they can take pictures with the escort of the landlords. So we didn't get anything from that information-wise. And once I got my private investigator, he went and was able to get access to the apartment to do forensics work. Once he got the forensics work done, he came back with evidence that somebody was in his apartment looking for something. But we didn't have a timeline to that. We didn't know if it was something Daniel did before he went to work or, something happened afterwards. We didn't have a time frame. But once my private investigator would no longer work for me, I was able to get the Tempe Police Department to do forensics for me. I talked to the mayor of Tempe and also the chiefs, and was able to have them do forensics of all of Dan's electronics in his apartments, the cell phone, everything that was found. And once that report came back, we found evidence of someone inside Dan's apartment after he went missing, looking for some things on his computer, going through his computer, doing searches and things like that. So we have a timeline. We put those two things together, what we saw in the apartment physically and also what we saw on the computer. We know someone was in there after the fact.
Okay, do you know what date that was? Did the forensics pull up what date the person was in the apartment doing the searches on his computer?
Yes, we do. However, unfortunately, I won't be able to give that date because it's still under my investigation. I'm still working on that, putting things together. But yes, we do have a date.
Okay. To jump a little bit forward to October 21st, I understand that law enforcement announced that Daniel had been talking to a woman via text messages, that he had met her and they exchanged phone numbers, and that she had claimed that Daniel showed up at her home a number of times and made her very uncomfortable. They asked Daniel's coworkers, his friends, about Daniel wanting to commit suicide because of that situation. Is that how the investigation went? Did it go downhill from there, or how did the investigation continue on?
Well, a lot of that stuff happened before the vehicle showed up. When it comes in terms of the young lady question they had with employees, the Buckeye Police Department utilized plurals when they only talked to one employee. That was one of Daniel's off-the-job friends. Daniel's a field geologist for Matrix New World. Matrix New World told me they rarely see their geologists come into the office. That's what they field geologists. And so nobody can assess what Daniel's mood was, off that job, because he don't actually work at the office. And this other part is with the young lady. My son, he mentioned the young lady 2 days before he went missing. He and I often have our conversations. Conversations are always 2 hours long, at least. That's the minimum. Within that conversation, he spoke about the young lady, but he never used the word love. He described to me spending the night with a young lady. Problem that we have as a family is that everything the lady said on this report, and it's based on what law enforcement put in that report, based on evidence of them allowing this young lady to upload her own text messages into their database. And we see that their text message that she sent up do not match his phone records. In other words, there's some things missing and some things added. So we definitely have a problem with that because it's bad representation of Daniel. There's no evidence when law enforcement says he showed up at her house. She saw him through a camera. Law enforcement failed to even pull video of that camera to verify, but put it in their report. So, those things did not exist in real time, but those are things are in the police report.
Okay. So I was reading that Fox 10 had published an article saying that law enforcement claimed that Daniel was acting strangely a couple days prior to the incident, to his disappearance, and that he loved this woman who he barely knew. But you're saying that's false, correct?
That is false. My son had never used the word love. And like I said, everything they heard about the young lady was brought up. They believe it was my daughter at the time, but saying that she gave him a podcast. That's what it pretty much started off from. And also I can elaborate on that with law enforcement. We're trying to get them all the information we can. That I did speak with my son 2 days prior, and we had a conversation about the young lady. Matter of fact, there's not just one young lady that my son spent that night with. It was two. there. For whatever reason, law enforcement is hiding the second person. But yes, it was definitely two ladies there with them, but never did Daniel express any love. He never was depressed and things like that. So when I hear that in law enforcement's assessment, it's problematic for a father. I'm a single parent of my son, and I know him a lot. I know his mood. For those 2 days prior to that, he was never in a mood of depression or anything like that.
Okay. David, what is the Buckeye Police Department doing now? I heard that they partnered with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, the Tempe Police Department. Are they still offering you assistance, or what's happening today on the case?
Well, I hate to sound like very critical, but that's been happening for over 2 years now. There's no communication with Maricopa, Tempe, and Buckeye. The only communication they have is the two, Maricopa and Tempe, siding with Buckeye. Is the Buckeye case. Maricopa County is resisting to help in Daniel's case, and when I say resisting, being that they are Maricopa County. My son went missing in Maricopa County. The county supersedes any city, department, but yet they did not want to take on to the case, as well as Tempe. My son was a resident of Tempe at the time. Tempe, like I said, offered the assistance to me directly. They said, hey, Mr. Ross, we're doing this as a favor to you to do those forensics on that electronics. But outside of that, of course, they shared it with the Buckeye Police Department because they're saying, again, it's a Buckeye Police Department case. And with that, not much been done in my son's case. I'm still fighting for the proper forensics on that vehicle. I'm holding that vehicle. I'm paying thousands of dollars on that vehicle to hold house forensics. I have the airbags that never been processed. I have the clothing that never been processed. You name it. I have all the things inside of Daniel's apartment that haven't been processed. The information about the computer that I was at. All the evidence that we know about Daniel's case came from my own investigation and my efforts outside of law enforcement.
Okay, so when it seems like they refuse to help, what is their narrative now? Since they believe that you said that Daniel had a head injury when he had an accident in the car and went through the sunroof, that he just disappeared in the desert. Is that what they're saying? Or
yes, that's the gist of it. He's pretty much the way I could take it as a family is that they feel that he staged the whole thing. Well, he did the whole thing himself. He masterminded. He decided to leave, or he ended up deceased out there in the desert, which I told you we covered over 35,000 acre land out there, line searching and area search, everything you can name, even use cadaver dogs myself, that I hired myself. We found other human remains, but never found Daniel. But what they have a stand for right now from day one, before the vehicle showed up, law enforcement, once the vehicle showed up, I want to backtrack on that. Once the vehicle showed up, law enforcement has always had the reservation that the vehicle was there in that ravine for 30 days, despite the rancher who's an eyewitness saying it wasn't there 2 days prior. And in spite of the evidence, my investigator gave law enforcement, they're pushing this 30-day narrative that the vehicle is out there for 30 days for whatever reason they want it there. So now they're basing their beliefs on what is called a mild IQ app that I gave to law enforcement that I found in my son's phone. And one of the owners of the app would tell law enforcement not to utilize that app for that purpose because it's inaccurate. It's not always reliable. But yet, because it helped them put that vehicle there for 30 days, they're basing their whole investigation on that.
So the app. So they're saying that the app tracked the vehicle, and the vehicle had been sitting there for 30 days in the ravine.
Well, yes, they say they tracked the vehicle to be in that ravine at I believe it was a little after 10 o'clock that morning that Daniel went missing. But mind you, like I said, there was one search that law enforcement did themselves with Silver Air Patrol. That's what they called. These guys was on the ground and they went over that area. The vehicle wasn't there. They later said, well, maybe they missed it because of the heavy brush, but there's no brush out there. Also, I've been, before the vehicle showed up out there, I had people on the ground doing my searches, hundreds of people at a time, doing searches out there in that area as well. What we call is a hasty search, people going out hiking, just looking for things for hours, and the vehicle wasn't there. So you put all those things there together, plus the evidence my investigator found that the vehicle was staged in that spot. The vehicle wasn't there.
Okay, so basically their timeline is that he was last seen around 9:15 on June 23rd, and then they believe that the car ended up in the ravine 45 minutes later, around 10 o'clock, and stayed there for 30 days.
That's correct. And the problematic with that is that I also gave this to law enforcement. Everything I gave it to law enforcement. on my son's phone, once law enforcement gave me his phone back on the 23rd of July, what I found was that the memory card was missing. His location was wiped from the phone. The information about the young lady was wiped from the phone. Just certain things. Everything else was intact, but certain areas was missing. The only thing that's very much contradicts the last person that seen my son. He said, "Hey, my son met him out on Sun Valley Parkway. My son talked for a brief moment. They rode into the desert 1 mile west, 2 miles north to make it to this well site. They made it there at 9 o'clock. At 9:15, my son was gone. He waved off to him and just disappeared forever." The problem with that is that on my son's phone, the phone record shows that my son made a phone call at 9:28 to him that he did not answer. My son was asking for directions in a text message. But those things that law enforcement know, but still hanging a hat on the story of the person who last seen my son. So it's all those kind of evidence that's there. Law enforcement have their reason for keeping their narrative strong to the public, but it defies anything else, defies the logic, defies the evidence and everything that was found from my personal investigation to my son's disappearance.
Okay, so let me ask you, you have the Please Help Find Daniel.com, Daniel Robinson Foundation. When did you launch that? When did you launch that for Daniel to get his information out there?
Yeah, first of all, I'm a military guy. I'm retired military. One thing for sure, when we're in the military, communication is key for anything. But once I got to Arizona, I talked to law enforcement, see what they will and would not do. I knew it was crucial to get information out quickly about my son. One of those things was open up social media platform pages, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And the second thing was to open up I build websites. So to start a website, a family website for people to get information about my son's case. They have a base to go to, so I can throw up pictures. And a lot of times, being a person of color, I realized quickly, without knowing statistics at the time, I didn't know anything about the disparities, but I do know, being a black man, that we have to sometimes humanize our person. And so to do that, I had to build a website, pleasehelpfinddane.com. That was to put all his pictures up to humanize my son. And he's very loved, those type things. Also, I opened up another second website. It's searchfordaniel.org. Once I started my searches, that was strictly for the search. But now they both are grafted into one, and that's pleasehelpfinddaniel.com.
Okay. What do you think happened to your son?
Well, without evidence, I can't say. I know foul play happened. I can put it straightforward as that, based on what my investigator gave me and the information that we have. But we just don't know what that exactly means. Foul play can mean a lot of things, but we know that's not natural. The vehicle wasn't there. It was a stage event. We know that something happened with that vehicle. There's been another location that came in contact with some things. We know about the apartment. We know about the eyewitness account that I have myself that I gave law enforcement, also a vehicle that looked just like his. We also know the vehicle that disappeared off the roadway that looked like Daniel's and ended up 2 days later. Law enforcement say the vehicle was found in the desert with the rancher. But what I saw is a lot of the evidence that says foul play. But like I said, I don't know what foul play happened, what it means. It could mean that he could be, because that is a high human trafficking area. Everybody knows Phoenix, Arizona especially, is a high human trafficking area. And so it could, God forbid, Daniel got tied up into that. You also have the mules that come through that part of the desert, according to Chief Hall at the time. And, we don't hope he didn't get in contact with those type deals. And also the fact that, because we don't know what happened, maybe we do know the accident happened somewhere else. Somebody took that vehicle and joyrided. I don't know. And, Dan's out there somewhere, don't know who he is or something, So I look at all those possibilities and just know that some type of foul play happened, but just don't know exactly, the status of my son.
Okay. So do you believe that your son is still alive?
Yes, I do. And I have to believe that. That's what keeps me going. I'm a man of faith. So of course, for me, refuse to think negative about my son. I really feel that it's only a matter of time and place that I will find out what happened. I can rescue my son and bring him back home to his mother, his siblings, his grandparents, his friends, to myself.
Okay. All right. And I understand at one point you might still have a GoFundMe page that you had to pay for private investigator services. Do you still have that up and running?
Yes, my GoFundMe page is still up. However, I focus more on the aspects of people asking for flyers. Flyers is free to the public. People can always go out and request that on pleasehelpfinddaniel.com. They also can print. I look at that as a form of donation because there's a print button there as well. If you want to print the flyers out yourself, that helps. Also, I have a mail-in protest to keep my son case from cold case status. As long as the public is involved in Daniel's case, as long as the interest is there, it'd be hard for law enforcement to call it a cold case when people are constantly asking about Daniel. So they can go join the protesting, the mail-in protest. That costs, because, you have to put stamps and you have to print. So that's a form of donation. That's what I'm asking the public to do. Also support me in my congressional run, because that's going to help families that I'm trying to get legislations change, get information in real time for families who need that information quickly, utilizing the technologies that we have today that will get answers really fast.
So if people go to pleasehelpfinddaniel.com, they'll be able to donate if they want to, be able to print out flyers for your son. All that information is available on that website in order for them to do that?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And you talked about you just talked about your run for Congress, and I understand that you said you're a veteran and you served in the Afghanistan war after 9/11. I saw in your platform or your campaign focuses on defending our democracy, championing civil rights, empowering voters, promoting reproductive rights, combating climate change, supporting the middle class, ensuring workplace equality, advancing education, building safe communities, addressing healthcare costs, and reforming missing persons policies. Did I get all that right?
Yes, you did. I really appreciate that.
Okay. And so what would you change in the reforming of missing person policies if you were elected into Congress for South Carolina?
Yes. One thing, I am running out of South Carolina Congressional District 2, but, being in Congress affects all of America. And, my son went missing. Of course, that's passionate for a parent. I'm out there in the desert working tirelessly with hundreds of volunteers every week out there working with me in that desert heat. I grew a passion and part of for my family. I call them my extended family, to help them find their loved one as well. I've been a very advocate for missing Americans in general, and making sure that I did everything I can, from having a day of remembrance to kind of like visuals, anything I can do to help families get awareness and people get awareness about their missing cases. One thing that I had learned while I was searching for my son is the fact that I'm still looking for cell phone pings. That would really, it's better than that Mile IQ app that law enforcement relying on. It's something that as a tool that we're using 224, but I'm being hindered because, law enforcement refusing to call Dane's case what it is. A criminal case, and without it being status of a criminal case, a judge would not give a warrant to get those cell phone ping data. But now it has been so long, the companies can say the company is saying there's no retention, data is gone forever. That is a problem.
Oh, really?
Yes, as we know that nothing ever disappears once it's digital. But companies hide behind that. They have policies that says, they will not give families that data. Their loved one could miss without a warrant, and also their retention is not there. So I told the telecommunication companies, when I had meetings with them, AT&T, T-Mobile, you name it, all of them, with the senators in Arizona, I told them I will be back. I will be back because what's happening is we have those policies in place when those data belong to the person who paid that bill every month. You got a cell phone, you utilize your phone, it do not belong to the company. You pay the service for that phone, the service for that use of your data to make a phone call, to text message, you name it, all that belongs to you. And so I want to make sure we free up that for the families through law enforcement where there's no warrant needed to get that data. And also the fact that we know that things don't disappear digitally. Telecommunications are required to keep a retention, not for 30 days, what we've seen in this case here, but to make sure that families are getting the data and the information they need in real time, and also help law enforcement.
Okay. You briefly touched on you branching out and you helping other people with missing family members. And I think that's a very positive and outstanding thing to do. Is that something that you think that Daniel would have wanted for you to do?
Yes, I know that. I know my son. He's an advocate for what's right. Of course, for my family, who we all are, we believe in people. He's a person that do everything he can to do what's right. I remember before he went missing, the last thing he done actively was the George Floyd protest. He was there. He called me. Like I said, we have our conversation. I was on the phone with him while he was out there protesting. He actually even did a news interview. I told him I wish I was there with him because I know what what Daniel stand for was right and was just. And, the fact that even though he's missing, I tell people all the time, if I found Daniel, that work would not end. I found my son and somehow decided to just disappear and don't help other families if I can. And Daniel will be by my side. That's the person he is. That's the way our family is. And I know that's exactly what Daniel would want.
Okay. I should have asked you this earlier, but can you tell me, I know that you just told me what Daniel stands for. Can you just tell me a little bit about Daniel, person he was, about just in general, what you think the public needs to know about Daniel, who he is?
Yeah, Daniel, he's the youngest of his siblings from my marriage. He's a person that, like I tell often, that he challenges himself as much as he challenges others. Everything he decided to do, he accomplished that. We all know that Daniel was born without a right hand, but that never stopped him on anything he wanted to do. Even in his young life, after he asked his mother once about what happened to his hand, she told him God having to return it to him one day. He just needed it. He never asked that again. He taught himself how to play the French horn on his own. He did so well that he even made the local news here in South Carolina about how great he is playing the French horn. He started off with playing, next went to the trumpet and played other instruments, and also tried to dabble in a little bit of sports. So anything he wanted to do, he'd go after it. He had his siblings, his older brother, to look up. All of my children are scientists, and he looked up to his older brother and challenged that and just to be better. So once he got to college, of course, decided to do geology. He fell in love with it in his freshman year and went ahead forward with it. Graduated with honors. Very friendly person, because when he in college, he pretty much come from a home where the parents, where I kind of pretty much kept him from certain things. I made sure he was in the right schools, him and his siblings. But when he got to college and got on his own, he had tons of friends. He's a very friendly person, so he brings people together. In the family life, the same thing. We have any kind of strife in our family, Daniel's always in the gap. He's the one that will bend and bring people together. He has an entrepreneur spirit. Once he graduated from college, he wanted to go out and venture to learn about others' cultures and things like that. So he's he had the entrepreneur spirit to start his own business. That's his plans going forward. Once he left Matrix New World to live in California, to live abroad, he wanted to be a millionaire before he's 30 years old. So Daniel he's a person that always positive. He talks about positive things. So he's a family oriented person. I'll use an example real quick. During the COVID time, we was unsure about what COVID really is at the time. Mm-hmm. Daniel traveled just to see his grandparents here in South Carolina. He stand outside the window because we didn't know about exposure. He stand outside the window just to see his grandparents through the window. That's the kind of person he is when it comes to family. So he would never desire to be away from his family. But, that's the character of Daniel. Like I say, he's a very brilliant scientist, and he's very loved.
Okay. David, is there anything else that we need to know about his disappearance or that you want to share about your run for Congress that we didn't cover?
We need to keep attention on my son's case, not just my case, Dane's case, but also other families. I tell people all the time, just pick a family a day or a week or whatever it may take to post on your social media. That's a lifeline for any family who have a missing loved one, is to have someone to share the story. Not all of us is fortunate to get any kind of coverage of a missing loved one. With over 600,000 Americans go missing every year, over 3,500 a day, 2,000 of which are children. And we need to share a case. That could be the lifeline, like I said, the difference between finding a person or not. And so we need to make sure we're doing that. My run for Congress is because of that. One of the biggest things about missing Americans, the 600,000, 40% of which are people of color. Though Black people, we make up only 13% of population, we're 40% of all missing cases. So we need to make sure that this missing American crisis is put in the forefront. It's something that's bigger than the opioids crisis that we've been having for a few years. The missing American crisis has been going on for decades, and we definitely need to bring attention and awareness to it as it should be. And so that's what my job is, running for Congress, to make sure that happens. I make sure I'm doing everything I can to bring Americans home. Also, being a military guy, I definitely have to look out for our Constitution, our freedom. I raise my right hand at MEPS in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Something that you do when you say you're serving this country, defending democracy, our way of life, our Constitution. And it's something that don't end just because I retired. It's something I have to continue to do to the rest of my days. And I intend to do that. So thank you so much for having me here to share.
That's no problem. I just wanted to share some information about Daniel. He's African-American, 5'8", 165 pounds. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And he was last seen on June 23rd, 2021. Where can they contact? Would they contact the Buckeye Police Department, or would they go to your website if anybody has any information about Daniel?
Yes, you can go to the website to utilize the tip line. I do pay for a tip line there, which I have the number on me right now, but to have the tip line you can find on the website. Also on the flyers. I pay for that service 24 hours, 7 days a week. Live operators take your call. You can remain anonymous. If you don't even want to talk to anybody, you still can remain anonymous. If you just text the word tip to that number, a form will come up. Like I said, you can remain anonymous. Also, you can call the Buckeye Police Department if you cannot get in contact or be not able to get to that website to leave a tip.
Okay, I have the Buckeye Police Department number as 633-349-6411, and your website as pleasehelpfinddaniel.com.
That's correct.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Robertson, David Robertson. Wish you well on your campaign forward. Appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Have a good day.
You too, sir. Thank you.